Let's be honest. Conversations about faith are often off limits. You might even think that the church is the last place you could express your doubts or questions about God. Well, we want to change that. Starting Point is a place where no questions or discussions are off limits. It's not about a teacher giving you information. It's about a conversation. It's about being with other people, like you. And we really mean that. You're free to ask any question you want. This is your opportunity to explore faith freely. It's not another place where people will talk at you. We want to talk with you. So are you curious about God, Jesus, the Bible, or Christianity? Or did you recently begin a relationship with Jesus? Or have you returned to church after some time away? Starting Point is for you. Every Starting Point group is guided by qualified leaders, but your voice matters to the group. Your thoughts add value. You may even ask the question that someone else is afraid to ask. Starting Point, a conversation about the story of God.
Good morning. My name is Katie. It's so great to be back with you. I missed you guys for most of the month of August. I went and got married, which is awesome and so exciting. I suppose as good of an excuse as it gets to miss church for a whole bunch of weeks in a row. And so it's great to be back with you guys, celebrating Labor Day weekend, I suppose. Hey, as we jump in this morning, if you've been around here before, you're familiar with the fact that we will sometimes ask questions of one another. So we'll turn either to the people that we came with or maybe make a new friend right next to you and just ask a really simple question. And this morning I have a little bit of a controversial one, so bear with me. If you haven't already lost faith in how suspicious this church is by the fact that the lead pastor came up in a swimsuit, which is as seen on TV from like 20 years ago. If you haven't already done that, then you may make some enemies here with this question. So I have a very important question to start us off with this morning. What was a great era of film? So when it comes to movies, when it comes to films, when it comes to television, what in your opinion is the greatest of eras in film? So go ahead and turn to the person next to you, make a new friend. What was a great era of film? Some of you are passionate about your answers, which means you're still answering, which is great. Far be it from me to stop you from talking about the greatest of films with your brand new friend next to you, but go ahead and step into this parallel question. What was a great era of your life? This is my full permission to revisit your glory days, whatever those were, with the person next to you. What era of life do you look back on and you say, that era of my life was legendary, that was so wonderful, that was great? Turn to the person next to you. What was a great era of your life? What's interesting about these questions is, number one, if you said a great era of film was mid-90s to mid-thousands rom-coms, you're right. That's it. It's the best. I will die on this hill. They just don't make movies like they used to, all right? Can't believe I'm saying that. So number one, you're correct if you said, yeah, that era of rom-coms was legendary. Number two, these questions are funny because, and even some of you, I heard you doing it, we start telling stories when we remember certain eras, certain periods of life, certain things that we love to revisit, we keep coming back to. And we know this because Hollywood hasn't made a new movie in like 20 years. It's like John Wick 17 and Top Gun again and, Jane Austen for the 1000th time, Netflix, we don't like that version. And it's just over and over and over again, we see these stories play out in our culture. This is one of the big ways in our culture that we tell stories is through film, through media, through music, as we tell these cultural stories that come up over and over and over again. And it's not dissimilar when we look at eras of our life as we start telling these little moments. Oh, this period of my life was great because of this thing that happened and that thing that happened. As stories shape us, and remembering things intentionally shapes us, and focusing on remembered points of our lives shapes us. The stories that we choose to tell, we choose to tell for certain ways of presenting ourselves to the world, and stories that we hold back and don't tell, we hold back and don't tell for certain ways of presenting to the world, and even sometimes presenting to ourselves. And this morning, the passage that we're in is a passage all about remembering. It's all about shared cultural fabric. It's all about what does it mean to be a follower of Christ. And maybe you're here because you've been following Christ your whole entire life, and you go, man, my heart couldn't love Jesus more. And maybe you're here this morning and you go, well, I'm here with a friend, and this wouldn't have been my first choice for a holiday Sunday morning, but I like this friend, so I'm curious about faith. Sure. Wherever you are on that spectrum, I hope that this morning there's this invitation for you of what would it look like if we were just a little bit more intentional with our remembrance? What would it look like if we were just a little more intentional with what and how we remember? A great era of my life was when I turned 25. I am over 25. Some people asked me after the first service, like, are you sure you're not like just 21? I did turn 25 in the past, and a great era of my life was this year because some of you have seen me up here playing guitar, and I sing, and I really enjoy music. I'm just good enough of a musician that people are like, that sounded nice, but I'm not good enough that people will like sign me and put me on tour, okay? Like, I'm very realistic about that. I grew up in Southern California where every other person is an aspiring actress or musician, and so I know where I stand in the pack, okay? And so I realized by the time I turned 25, I realized if I ever want to go on tour, I gotta do this myself. I'm gonna have to just put myself on tour, be my own manager and PR person. Not my strength on either of those fronts, okay? So I ended up playing a lot of street corners. But what I thought is I would love to put myself on tour, and I would love to try and sing in 25 cities when I'm 25 years old. This would be so much fun. How many cities could I sing in 12 months? I ended up playing really illustrious venues like a dive bar in Georgia, a street corner in Central Park, like really big deal. I don't know if you guys heard about this tour before. And I was very excited for one of the biggest gigs that I got. It was like maybe one of 2 paid gigs. They gave me like all of $75. And I was playing in Denver, and we had a whole group of us were playing together, and we had gone to like a bowling alley and restaurant the night before. And when you walk in, it was the middle of January, so the coat room was packed with stuff. And they said, oh, just leave all your bags in here. It's good to go. Like, everyone can just drop their stuff here, and then we'll go bowl and eat some food. And the bags were all left there. By the time we got back, my bag had been stolen. It was just gone. And I looked around at the other bags. I was like, they didn't need to steal my $40 backpack. Like, that's a JanSport. You can get that at Target. Like, this Louis Vuitton would have been a better pick, but okay. And my backpack had been stolen, and in it was my computer, my wallet, everything. It was to the point that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get on an airplane back home, right? It was all messed up. And I very quickly sprang into action, collected the facts, and said, easy, I'll track them down. They can't be far. It just happened, right? So I opened up my bank app on my phone, and they had been spending up a whole bunch of money at 7-Eleven, which, I don't know, I feel like if I'm a thief and I get someone's credit cards, like, I'm going to do one better than 7-Eleven. There's only so many hot dogs that you can eat. I don't know. But they had gone to 7-Eleven, and I knew it was right around the corner. So I was like, I'm going to catch them. Like, I got to get my stuff. And I started to walk out the door, and one of my friends with great presence of mind said, have you thought this through? You do have the facts, but I'm not entirely sure you should go chase down whatever kind of person jacked your backpack and confront them in 7-Eleven. I feel like maybe there's wiser ways to go about this. They were right. I wouldn't have been able to catch up to them anyway. By the time the payments had posted everything, it was far too late. Went and filed a report. I forgot to tell the first service that how it ended is super anticlimactic. It just was lost, okay? After the first service, people were like, what happened to the bag? It was gone. I spent the next 3 months on the phone with the bank. And so what was interesting about that, though, is that I had all the facts. Like, I knew my bag had been stolen. I knew it was around the corner. I knew that if I ran down there, I could probably grab it. I knew where the people were. I had all the facts, but the story I was constructing was not super reasonable. And we do this really frequently in life, where we can collect a whole bunch of facts, but it's the stories that shape us in life, not just facts. I don't know about you, but I've never met anybody who has had their life changed because of facts. I've never met anybody where I go, hey, what's the greatest era of their life? And they'll be like, well, in 2002, my bank account balance was. It's just not like, we just don't go with the facts like that. Facts are good and facts are important, but stories are what shape us and create us into something more. And we can have all the facts, and I can know I got to run around the corner and try and get my bag, but that wasn't really the true story. That wasn't the best story or interpretation of what I needed to do and what was that next step. Remembering is such a human thing. Telling stories is such a human thing. And the passage that we're looking at this morning is all about that. If you've got a Bible with you or in front of you, or if you want to pull this up on your phone, on the YouVersion app, or even just Google it, we're going to be in Psalm 92 this morning. Psalm 92. And I'll have it up here on the screen as well. Psalm 92 this morning. And we're going to read the whole thing. This morning we're in between two series. We start our new series on James next week. And so this morning is just a reminder morning of kind of what it means to follow Christ, to have meaningful stories that we remember. Psalm 92, I'm going to read this out loud. And if you have it in front of you, you can follow along. Psalm 92 says this: it's good to praise the Lord, to sing praise to your name most high, to declare your faithful love in the morning and your faithfulness at night, with a 10-stringed harp and the music of a lyre. For you have made me rejoice, Lord, by what you've done. I'll shout for joy because of the works of your hands. How magnificent are your works, Lord. How profound are your thoughts. A stupid person does not know. A fool does not understand this. Though the wicked sprout like grass and all evildoers flourish, they will be eternally destroyed. But you, Lord, are exalted forever. For indeed, Lord, your enemies will perish. All evildoers will be scattered, but you have lifted up my horn like that of a wild ox. I've been anointed with oil. My eyes look down on my enemies. My ears hear evildoers when they attack me. The righteous thrive like a palm tree and grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they thrive in the courtyards of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age, healthy and green, to declare the Lord is just. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Many of us in high school English or literature class had to study a little bit of Shakespeare. I was told that we study Shakespeare in high school because it's a little more accessible because it's written in English. I disagree. It's not English. It's not understandable in any way, shape, or form. And one of the challenges of studying Shakespeare is we're so far removed from Shakespeare's culture several hundred years ago that it doesn't always translate over. It doesn't always make a ton of sense, right? Like Shakespeare was known for his roasts, that he would just burn people, and we would have to study them in school, and he would be mocking someone and make a joke, and then we would read it, and it would just go right over my head. Like, I remember one of them was something like, you're not worth the sun burning. I was like, is a sunburn a good thing? Like, I don't understand what these actually mean, right? And that's in English. And you have to sit there and you have to go, okay, well, in the culturally and this and that and the other thing, and okay, this makes a little more sense when you put it in context. And yeah, Queen Elizabeth would have laughed. That was a funny joke about the sunburn. I get it now, okay? And this is the same kind of thing. This is the same kind of challenge that we face with sometimes these ancient scriptures. This was written not in English. This was originally a poem that was written in Hebrew. And it was a really, really good poem. I mean, put within the context of the literature for the day, sometimes we miss in translation and we miss culturally. We go, my horn was lifted up like a wild ox. I personally have never seen a wild ox, much less know what it means for a horn to be lifted up. And so sometimes we miss those things. And so bear with me just for a second while I tell you how great of a poem this is in the original language. It's written in what's called chiastic structure. It was a really common structure to write poems in of the day. And chiastic structure looks a little bit exactly like an X, where you have point A, point B, and then a hinge point in the middle, and you go back to B and back to A. So the whole poem kind of goes like up a hill and back down. It's supposed to be a little bit circular in nature to remind you of a truth by showing you that truth in different venues. And then you go, oh, okay, I get that. That's really true. So this whole poem, this whole original song and poem is supposed to kind of make a circular point. It starts out by saying God is faithful and just, and you'll see this in verses 1 to 3. It's talking about who God is, right? And so you see point A, verses 1 to 3, God is good, God is faithful, God is just. It has these praises to say about who God is. Point B is all about our response to that love. So we can learn trust from remembering that God is faithful and just. And then you get to, this one actually has its point A, B, C, C, B, A. So it's like I said, it's a very good version of a chiastic poem. Point C is that the wicked are doomed. So you go, God is good. Here's my response to God's goodness. I'm going to remember the wicked are doomed. And then you have this hinge point. It talks about, in verse 8, you'll see the Lord is exalted forever. That's the hinge point. We've reached the top of the mountain. Now we're going to come back down. It says again, point C, the wicked will perish. You'll see that in verses 9 to 11. Because God is faithful and just, wickedness will be overthrown, right? And then we get back to point B again. This again is our response to God, is we flourish because of who he is. And then we go all the way back to the top, point A. God is so good. He is so just. He is so holy. That's how the psalm closes. And so we see this model. And this is important because this probably was a poem that you'll see at the very top. It says that this was a song for the Sabbath day. And in that day, these were memorized things. You know, at the end of every service here at Eastwind, we have a little blessing that we say together. It's kind of our own Sabbath song. We know it. We say it together every single week. We put the words on the screen. And this is kind of what they would have for the Sabbath day. We'll get to Sabbath in just a second, but it's important for us to know that this is the principle of this song, is that God is faithful and just. We learn trust from remembering that God is faithful and just. And because God is faithful and just, wickedness will be overthrown. Because wickedness will be overthrown, we can trust that God is faithful and just. And because we know that trust and that love for God, then we can actually believe that God is faithful and just. It all is tangled up with each other. And this was a song, a poem, a cultural icon, right? Kind of how we revisited some of our glory days just a second ago, and there might be a soundtrack to your glory day where you go, oh, I remember this song was the song of the era. This psalm was the song of the era for ancient Jews. This psalm meant something deep to them. And now we touch on the Sabbath of this little subtitle at the top. You might see it if you have a paper Bible or you have a Bible app. It says a song for the Sabbath. It says something along those lines. And this psalm, this song for the Sabbath was this beautiful tradition that the ancient Jews had. It went something like this. When God gave the 10 commandments to ancient Israel, to the Jews, he gave these 10 really important commandments. And they were big things like don't murder. We all are like, oh, that's all right, checks out. That's probably a good way to live in community. And it would say, don't covet what your neighbor has. We go, that's probably wise. We don't steal so many backpacks that way. That seems like a good idea. And it goes, don't commit adultery with your neighbor's wife. We go, that probably is going to create a better society too. And it's these things that God goes, these are the most important things to me. And in that list of the most important things is a command to keep the Sabbath day holy. The Sabbath day holy, to not do any work on the Sabbath day. And what that looked like was for the Jews at sunset on Friday night, all the way until sunrise on Sunday morning, they weren't to do any work. They weren't to accomplish anything. One of my friends calls the Sabbath a protest against production, where all they would do is just be humans for a day. And they wouldn't just be humans as in this was their one day to sleep in. They would live an intentional life for those 24 hours that was focused on remembering God. And as a part of that, they had routines and rhythms that happened every single Sabbath, such as having specific meals together or singing specific songs together. This song being a song for the Sabbath meant that in an installed and planned and guarded piece of time in every Jew's week, they would rehearse and remember God's goodness and faithfulness and justice. They would rehearse and remember that though it may look like the wicked are succeeding and flourishing, God has an ultimate plan. They would rehearse and remember that when we are followers of God, we end up like a cedar and a palm tree, and we're planted in the house of the Lord. This is important because sometimes I think that this is one of the great sins of our culture, if you will. We're so busy. We're so chaotic. We have a hard time sometimes rehearsing our own life stories, much less the story of God in our life. We have a hard time remembering just the people that are even closest to us, much less God's presence in our lives. I want to have us turn once again to one another and just ask this question: how busy is your life? Maybe you're here today and you go, Katie, I'm barely in this room this morning. You do not understand the level of busyness. Maybe you're here this morning and you go, I wish my life was busy. I miss what it used to be busy. So whatever it is, if you would turn to the person next to you again, how busy is your life? And would you say, in your own opinion right now, would you say there's space in your life to rehearse your most important stories? Maybe those are stories of God's faithfulness. Maybe you're like, I'm just checking faith out, but I do have some important stories, and I call my friends and remind them of that one time they did that one stupid thing all the time. I rehearse my most important stories. So turn to the person next to you. How busy would you say your life is? And where is there space to rehearse your most important stories? When we rehearse stories, we practice relationship. When we revisit stories, we build relationship. A lot of people, in finding out that I just got married, one of the number one questions, how did you meet? People want the story rehearsed. They want to know kind of what's behind things. And people rehearse stories to practice relationship. There's a story that's been haunting me all summer. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop talking about it. It's been messing with my heart in the best of ways. When we see in the New Testament, there's these 4 biographies of Jesus' life, the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And towards the end of those books, we read the story of how Jesus kept warning people, I'm gonna be betrayed. I'm gonna be handed over to the governmental powers of the day. They're gonna falsely accuse me of all kinds of things. They're going to give me up to be killed, but don't worry, I'm going to rise again. And over again, his disciples, the people that followed him, his friends, they misunderstood. Over and over again, we see Jesus in the course of his ministry really baffle people. The people that followed Jesus around thought they knew what God was up to. I don't know if you've ever felt that way. You feel like, I know what God is doing. And then pretty promptly, it gets dashed. Over and over again, there's these stories in these biographies of Jesus' life, like the story of the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus and says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Because the thing is that Jesus was walking around telling people really awesome ways to live and preaching a different kind of life. He had this eternal life, this good life promised, and everyone who listened to it said, I would love to have that kind of life. That sounds so good. That sounds like the kind of life that I should be living and I want to live. And so people would come like this rich young ruler and say, how do I get that kind of life? And Jesus would say, go sell everything you own. And the rich young ruler said, pass. I don't know about that. I thought you were just going to give me a good life. I didn't know I had to give something up. And Jesus' disciples, some of his closest friends would follow him around and they'd say, Jesus, when you bring the new kingdom? And he said, yes. And they said, can you sit us in the top 2 places of power, on your left and on your right? Make us top dogs with you. And Jesus said, it's like you haven't been getting anything I'm saying. This is not it. These people that followed him around for years thought they knew what God was doing. And so when Jesus kept saying, I'm going to be betrayed, I'm going to be crucified, I'm going to rise again from the dead, they started saying, stop talking like this. This isn't how God wants you to live. This is not the kingdom. Stop talking like this. This isn't how it works, Jesus. You're going to free us from Rome. Most of the people that followed Jesus were really oppressed. They were struggling even sometimes to have enough to eat. They were constantly in fear of violence. Many families were being torn apart. There was all of this horrific stuff that when people were following Jesus, they thought, this is the ticket. This is the answer. Jesus is going to lead us all the way up to the last week of Jesus' life. He rides into Jerusalem on a donkey, and people start taking off their cloaks and putting them in front of him, which was a symbol of what you would do with a conquering general. They said, even up to the last days of his life, people were wildly misunderstanding what Jesus was about because they thought they knew how life with God was supposed to look. They had an image in their head of the good life. And then Jesus gets betrayed by one of his closest friends. He gets arrested. There's a sham trial. Witnesses are paid off to say lies about him. He gets sentenced. He gets whipped and beaten. He gets sentenced to crucifixion, which was a method of execution that the Romans made to be as humiliating and excruciating as humanly possible. They dragged out death as much as possible. And he dies. And all of these people that have been following him, I know some of us know how that feels. Because you go, God, I thought you said this. I thought you promised me this kind of life. Where are you? I thought you promised me the good life, but you just died. I thought you promised me the good life, and everything is not as it should be. Jesus died on a Friday, and after he died and had his last breath on the cross, some of his friends came around to collect his body and give it at the least a proper burial. And some of the women that followed him said, we're gonna wrap his body up and we're gonna anoint it and we're gonna at least it's a mangled body by this point, but it's still their friend. And they said, we're gonna at least give it a proper burial. And so they go to put him in the tomb. And the sun sets and it's Sabbath, and so they can't do any work. They're good Jews. They follow the word of the Lord. And so they say, okay, we're gonna Sabbath. And I sit there and I think about that, and I don't know if I have that in me. They followed God in the darkest moment. They said, if ever there was a time, my personal opinion, if ever there was a time to break the Sabbath, it would be when Jesus dies and you need to anoint his body for burial. If ever there was a time. And these women don't do that. They leave the body in an open tomb, and they say, we'll come back after the Sabbath. And in the darkest hour of their life, they spend 24 hours doing nothing. Imagine. The rug gets pulled out from under everything you ever thought you knew about God and his plan for your life. You watch one of your best friends be viciously executed. And then you go home and you sit there for 24 hours in what's supposed to be a celebration of rest. Psalm 92 was a song for the Sabbath, so they probably said these words. They probably sat around and maybe barely able to choke the words out, recited the poem that they had grown up with. They said, "It's good to praise the Lord, to sing praise to your name most high, to declare your faithful love in the morning and your faithfulness at night, with a 10-stringed harp and the music of a lyre. For you have made me rejoice, Lord, by what you've done. I'll shout for joy because of the works of your hands. How magnificent are your works, Lord, how profound your thoughts. A stupid person doesn't know, a fool doesn't understand this. Though the wicked sprout like grass and all evildoers flourish." Imagine the faces in their minds at this moment. Though the wicked sprout like grass, though I've seen them kill Jesus, they will be eternally destroyed. But you, Lord, are exalted forever. For indeed, Lord, your enemies will perish. All evildoers will be scattered. You have lifted up my horn like that of a wild ox. I've been anointed with oil. My eyes look down on my enemies. My ears hear evildoers when they attack me. The righteous thrive like a palm tree and grow like a cedar tree in Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they thrive in the courtyards of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age, healthy and green, to declare the Lord is just. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. And they pray, and they honor the Sabbath. And early on Sunday morning, at the first light of dawn, they gather up their spices and their oils, and they head to the tomb. And I wonder if they got to be the first witnesses to the most important event in all of human history, the resurrection of the Son of God, because they knew what it meant to trust and believe God in the darkest hours. I wonder if they had so built this story and these words into the marrow of their bones that even when they weren't sure that they entirely believed it, they just did the next thing. They obeyed God. They said, I'm gonna believe what I can't see. I'm gonna hold on to what I'm not sure I know. The cedar and the palm tree are really intentional here. The cedar, it says a cedar in Lebanon. Lebanon would get pretty severe snow, and the cedar is renowned for surviving severe winters. The cedar is a tree that thrives in frost. Not all trees can survive that. The cedar is one that can. And the palm tree is known for being a desert tree. It can survive with very little water, and it just reaches up higher and higher to the heavens in the midst of desert spaces. And these women are going through a winter and a desert all at the same time, and they say these words around a table to one another. We're going to be like the cedar and the palm tree. And the next morning when they go to the tomb, they are talking amongst themselves on the way, and they say, who's going to roll the stone away from the tomb? Who's going to help us? It's too heavy. And they get to they don't even have a plan. They don't even hardly know what they're doing. And they show up to the tomb. They're just trying to do whatever they can to love Christ, to obey. And they show up to the tomb, and angels are there waiting for them. They say, why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here, he's risen. Go tell everybody. Because Christ has now made a way through death into life. Christ has now built a different kind of kingdom, one that doesn't just remove you from difficult circumstances, but instead makes you like the cedar and the palm tree to survive deserts and winters of all kinds. We this morning are rehearsing a story through the act of communion. With bread and juice, we're rehearsing the story that Jesus, by his broken body on the cross, Jesus, by his blood shed for us, has given us a way through death into life. That Jesus has given us a way to become like a cedar and a palm tree in the midst of circumstances that make us question if God knows what he's doing. As we celebrate this morning, if this is a if this is a practice that you say, yes, this is it, then in just a minute we're going to be able to come up and receive that. If this is maybe your first time in church or you're not super sure about the whole bread and juice thing, I'm going to just be standing right over here. I would love to just say a blessing for your week, just a brief prayer to bless your week as you go out. And so if that's you, just come up and see me, make eye contact. I'll say a quick blessing for you. But as we do this morning, I invite you to let that story haunt you a little bit as it has me. What it means to, on the Sabbath day, say a prayer that we don't always know entirely if we believe yet, but by faith we practice it and we rehearse it, because these are the relationships that we hold to, is knowing who God is, knowing his goodness, and knowing that the storms can come and the winter can come and the desert can be as dry as ever, but that we've been transplanted to the house of the Lord, and there we'll be protected. The last thing that I want to point out is this, that it says the house of the Lord, and if you think of modern houses and a tree planted in the middle of them, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but the houses in that day were built kind of with a courtyard in the middle, and the courtyard would have all kinds of plants and trees and things like that coming up, but the fact that a house was built around it was a barrier, so that in the most severe of storms, there was a house of the Lord all around. And in the driest of deserts, there was a house of the Lord all around. The family of God literally encircled these trees. So as we take communion this morning, I want that image soundly in your head that there can be snow, there can be desert, there can be dryness, and yet in the midst of that, there's still the house of the Lord all around us. And yet in the midst of that, there's still the family of God very, very physically encircling us and with us. And that's part of what it means to be able to be the cedar and the palm tree, is that you're not in it alone. So as we just pause for a moment, I just want to invite you to reflect on one more question, just with yourself. You don't need to turn to anybody for this one. Just reflect in yourself. And it's just a question of honesty between you and God, of how much do you believe in his love right now? How much do you believe anything that I've said in the last few minutes? How much do you go, that's foolishness, Katie? And I invite you to this moment of honesty, because as we reflect on how much do you believe in love, how much do you believe in God's love, it creates a space for us to pray. And if you say, I believe in it, and this is why, and you have a million stories to rehearse in your head, then just spend a moment rehearsing those stories. And if you go, I don't believe in it, and this is why, then I invite you to just tell God honestly exactly where you're at. Because exactly where you're at is where God is going to meet you. So we're going to take just a second. The band's going to come on up, and I just want you to take a second to yourself. How much do you believe in God's love right now?